I have prepared uh, kind of a rebuttal to the Bart Sibrel Joe Rogan show,
All right.
if we want to get into that. So I kind of just wrote down some timestamps and something that was said, and then I would like to reply to that. Does that sound okay?
Do you want me to hit those timestamps as we go?
No, I don't think so. I'll just mention it
Okay.
because it's not no need to watch it really, unless there's something you need to watch again. But
No, no. I played
um,
the clip that I wanted to play.
yeah. All right, so let me just go through here because this is a bit of a long subject, and I'll see how quickly I can get through this. All right, so before we start, let me just say that yeah, Bart Sibrel is a great guy, and he certainly means well, and in the past he even admitted to me. He says, I'm not really an expert in presenting evidence of the hoax because he's a he's an expert in telling his stories, and the guy has some stories to tell. I mean, he's been through so much. He's been abducted by the CIA and been punched in the face. But so I mean, I the guy is very sincere, but there's regarding presenting evidence of the hoax. So regarding evidence of hoax, you have what's called the circumstantial evidence, and then you have the solid evidence. So if you say something like, well, they could do it back then with the 1/3 millionth of the computing power of a cell phone, and we can't do it today. We could do it then, but we can't do it today. 50 years better technology. So this is what you call circumstantial evidence. It's not proof of a hoax. It's just something which makes you go, how could they do it then and not today? It's not proof of a hoax. In order to actually have proof of a hoax, you need hard, solid evidence, right? That this is a photograph which has been manipulated, or this is wrong. So this is not the Bart's specialty. So so that's the excuse me. That's the first thing I want to say is that I really love Bart to pieces. The guy's a great guy and he means well. And his stories, I have no reason to doubt any of his stories. What he's been through so much, and yeah, it's just we need to take it to the a next level where we are more scientific about our analysis of the evidence here. So I'm gonna go into something Joe Rogan said. So at 10 minutes into the conversation, Joe Rogan said, well, the Apollo mission was to beat the Russians. Okay. And Bart didn't say anything here. So this is where I would have immediately jumped in and say, wait a minute. The Russians knew Apollo was that NASA was a hoax, if Apollo was a fake. The Russians knew it was not a space race, so to say. Every time the the Soviets made any advancement in space, it was because they were getting help from the Americans. The whole illusion was that the Soviets were ahead, and then all of a sudden America wins and takes the gold. Gets the final man on the moon. So to say that we did it to beat the Russians. See, this is going to be the excuse which NASA makes when they release the fact that they faked it. They're going to say, "Well, we did it to beat the Russians." And this is just replacing one lie with another lie. There was not to beat the Russians. The Russians were never ahead, and the Russians knew they were faking it, the whole time. So it's kind of a long story because I did many documentaries on this, the whole Cold War hoax, and not only the Cold War hoax, the entire Soviet Union, from the creation of the Soviet Union until the collapse of the Soviet Union. from 1917 until 1990, the whole thing was a hoax, right? It was just the two puppets, right? Controlled opposition. So yeah, this there was not this Cold War beating the Russians. That whole thing is just another lie, and the fact that Joe Rogan actually believes that it. See, there's two ways. Like, there's two ways you can go with that. One, it could not have been a hoax because otherwise the Russians would have blown the whistle, or it was a hoax, and the reason we faked it is because we had to beat the Russians. But both of them are nonsense. There was no beating the Russians. The Russians were way behind in everything. And I did a lot of video series on this, very in detailed video series about how far behind the Soviets were in everything. And also, I also interviewed an ex-Soviet whistleblower. That's a very interesting if you ever get to see that show. So yeah, the whole idea that we did it to beat the Russians is total nonsense. Okay. So anyway, let's go on to the next point. One thing that Bart said is there was only 3 eyewitnesses to the event. Bart says it was so easy to fake because there's only 3 eyewitnesses. There's only 3 people in the capsule, and those were the only 3 that knew what was going on. That's not the way spaceships work. Okay, so in order to have a capsule and human beings inside of space, there has to be continual ground tracking support, right? So it's not just 3 men floating around inside a tin can. There's a ground tracking control which know that they didn't go to the. They were watching the capsule in the low Earth orbit the entire time, and they knew that. So I'm just kind of correcting Bart here on something he kept. Well, there's only 3 eyewitnesses to the event. No. There's many eyewitnesses, many people in the tracking control who knew exactly where the ships were at all time. All right, second. Now here at about 16 minutes, Joe Rogan proposes the idea that maybe they faked the images. They really did go to the moon, but they provided us with fake images because the radiation damaged the cameras and the film. Oh God! So it's kind of funny that the radiation was enough to damage the film, but not enough to damage the human beings. Mm. It's so ridiculous. I mean, so the thing is this. Okay, granted, not everybody is an astrophysicist. Not everybody understands the problems of space radiation. Not everybody understands where does the space radiation come from, what are the different categories of space radiation. See, if Joe Rogan would have invited me on, then I would have just stopped it right there. So wait a minute, you obviously don't understand space radiation. And then I would have broken down all the categories and how it affects humans and, Okay. So the next point, then Joe Rogan, about 17 minutes in, he says that he brings up this thing about a Project Gemini image which was faked, and it's actually proven. But then he says that, but maybe they faked it just for publicity stunts. He proposes that theory that maybe the images weren't good, and for publicity's sake we had to produce some fake images. Yeah, maybe like in the early Gemini missions, he's just trying to explain away that one image that was proven to be a fake. There's that one Gemini image which was proven to be a fake, and he says, well, maybe it was just a publicity stunt. But that has nothing. That wouldn't have anything to do with the Apollo missions. You either went there or you didn't. And it's not a publicity stunt, right? There's a new movie coming out, right, where they're this year about they're doing a new publicity. They had to do it to as a publicity stunt, to make it look better. And I think I haven't watched the movie, but obviously they're going to probably make the excuse that or the images weren't good enough, so we used the publicity images rather than the real images. That might be the angle, because they're trying
That's
to
what Joe
ease
Rogan
this.
was trying to use.
Right.
That was the devil's advocate. We're like, well, maybe they did make it to the moon, but they had to fake the images because they got destroyed with the radiation. Blah blah blah. Yeah, that. And I've heard several people make that excuse. I think it's a bullshit excuse. Like if that were the case, if they did make it to the damn moon, they I think this is just my dumbass thinking. It would just be honest. Look, we made it to the moon. Here's what we collected. Blah blah blah. Here's what
Sorry,
we
the
think.
pictures didn't turn out.
Yeah, the pictures didn't fucking survive. Um, eh, that would be a lot easier to digest than this other freaking nonsense. I
Yeah.
don't. I don't like when people use that as an excuse at all. And there's quite a few people that will go along with that.
Yeah, actually, it's been this whole thing is part of a psyop, a part of a much larger psyop, and it even ties into the aliens on the moon theory. That's
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
two main psyops. There's the flat Earth and then the alien moon base psyop. So that's been going on ever since 2014. They said that in 2014 was when they first proposed that theory, is that NASA went to the moon and they encountered aliens, so that's why they provided us with fake images.
It's so
But
stupid.
this is all
Yeah.
part of a psyop, and so yeah, it's not even, it's so
It
ridiculous.
it doesn't
Just
make
the
sense.
theory. Right. The theory, even coming back to the radiation damage, the film theory, it doesn't make any sense, unless you know nothing about space radiation, because any space radiation which would damage film would damage your DNA. You'd be turned into a teenage mutant ninja turtle, you know. So, so
Yeah.
anyway,
Turtles
let's
in a
go on
half
to the next.
shell.
Let's
Yeah.
go on to the next point. Okay, so finally Joe Rogan asks a really good question. So at the 17 minutes and 40 seconds, Joe says, "But NASA does real things. So where is the line? Where is the line between where did the lie begin and where does the reality uh, end? What is the line between where reality ends and the lie starts?" So this is something I feel is a very important. Of course, Bart wasn't able to give any answer to that. So I think it's very important for me to explain this. Okay, so when did the fakery begin? Okay, it began it began on March 18th, 1965. This was when Alexei Leonov made the first so-called Soviet spacewalk. Okay, so the lie began in 1965. The Soviets were the first to fake anything. And the reason the Soviets faked anything is because the NASA told them to fake it. Because in 1965, NASA in the US told the Soviets, we need to create the illusion of a space race, and we need to create the illusion that you guys are winning. So we're going to help you do everything. We're going to help you get the first spacewalk. We're going to help you get the first soft landing of the unmanned craft. We're going to help you get the first lunar orbit insertion, you know. And and then in 1965, the NASA told the Soviets, we need you to do the first spacewalk. And the Soviets said, we have no idea how to do a spacewalk. So then the NASA told them, okay, just fake it. We don't, you don't actually need to do it. So the first fakery was in 1965 with this first Soviet spacewalk. Now, then you have the Gemini missions. Okay, so personally, I don't have any reason to doubt the Gemini missions. They seem to be real, but somewhat real. So let me just run through those really quick. So on June 3rd, 1965, Gemini 4, Ed White, opened the door and jumped out of the hatch and was floating there on the line. And I don't have any reason to doubt that. It looks real to me. And it's possible to fake these things, but to me, I don't have any reason to doubt that because it is low Earth orbit, and it's possible to do. The suits were ready, the spaceships were ready. It's now so that I don't believe is a hoax. But then in February 22nd, 1966, was the Cosmos 110, and this was when the Soviets claimed to have sent two dogs through up high into the Van Allen belts. And they said, look, those two dogs survived the Van Allen belts. So this was in 1966. The Soviets claimed that two dogs survived the Van Allen belts. Of course, later we can see that the dogs actually didn't go high enough to actually reach the belts. But the fact that the Soviets were claiming at the time that the dogs survived the Van Allen belts, this helped set the stage for NASA to fake the moon landing. The Soviets were claiming the dogs survived the Van Allen belts, so then the public could buy the Apollo missions. So this was the second piece of fakery, again by the Soviets in 1966. Then again, then you have Gemini 9, Gemini 10, Gemini 11, Gemini 12. So in all these missions, they opened the hatch and they did what do you call a stand-up EVA or a tethered EVA, where they actually jumped out of the door or they stood there in the door. So I don't have much reason to doubt these things. But there is a question here, which I want to bring up, is now in these Gemini missions, they'd open the door and he'd stick his head out the hatch and he had a camera and you can see photos of him and the Earth in the background. To me, that's not fake. That's real stuff. But the question is this: if you open the door to the spaceship, how long will the film in your camera survive? Okay, this is the very important question. So now, what happens is this: if you're inside of a spaceship, you have a nice warm cockpit. Right? It's the atmosphere, the air in there is warmed up, and then once you open the door and all that atmosphere gets sucked out into space, then everything starts cooling down, starts freezing. It starts getting really cold once you lose your atmosphere. So now, regarding the film in the camera, at what temperature is that film going to start breaking down? So this is a question which needs to be answered. On the Apollo detectives, they've actually put film in a vacuum chamber and did some different experiments with that, but it's not very conclusive because we need to find out exactly at what temperature do they break down, and then we can calculate how long that film would last. So coming back to the Gemini missions, we had the first spacewalk, means they opened the door, was 23 minutes long. Okay, 1965, the 23-minute spacewalk. I can believe that because, yeah, I think it would take more than 23 minutes for the film to actually freeze. Once the film freezes, it's a dead film. But then in 1966, the Gemini 9. Eugene Cernan claims to have done a 2-hour spacewalk. 2-hour spacewalk means the film could survive in dropping in temperature for 2 hours. That's a little bit questionable for me. So I don't doubt. There's clips of him doing these spacewalks, and I don't doubt these clips, But whether or not he was really out there for 2 hours, that's a little bit questionable. So whether or not there was fakery in the Gemini missions, I'm not sure. It could be that they claimed the spacewalks were longer than they really were. Could be, but it could have been. It could have been a 2-hour EVA. But anyway, I don't think there was fakery in the Gemini missions. You had a 2-hour EVA from Eugene Cernan, a 2-hour EVA from Mike Collins, and then Yeah, we had a 1 hour EVA from Mike Collins, a 30-minute EVA from Mike Collins. Gordon did a 30-minute EVA, then a 2 hour EVA. Buzz Aldrin on a Gemini 12 did two of these 2 hour EVAs and then a 1 hour EVA supposedly. So, like I said, when I examined that evidence, I'm not sure. It could be real, it could be fake. I'm not sure, but I have no reason to doubt whether it's real or not. It could have possibly happened. So, I don't think there was fakery in the Gemini missions. But now, coming back here, September 14th, 1968, Zond 5. This is very important. So, this is the third fakery. Okay. The Russians claimed that two turtles survived a journey around the moon. Okay.
Turtles?
Have you
Like
heard?
turtle power?
Yeah, tortoises, right? Actually, tortoises. But there was several biological samples, and it's called the Zond 5. And they sent that craft. It circled around the moon and came back to Earth. And now the Russians claimed what happened was the turtles survived, and we pulled them out of the return uh, capsule, and they survived, but only for a little while. They died a few days after, and the cause of death is starvation and dehydration. This was the official Soviet story for why the turtles died. Now, as we all know, the reason the turtles actually died is because of radiation poisoning. you know so but the Russians claimed that the turtles survived, and the reason they died later is because of starvation. So this is actually the third piece of fakery. So the first actual pieces of fakery, the first three hoaxes, were actually pulled off by the Russians. The first spacewalk, the first dogs through the Van Allen belts, and the turtles which went around the moon and came back. All all three of these were fakes. The first three fakes were actually conducted by the Soviets, and NASA was, of course, encouraging them to do that. Okay, so that's when you talk about where's the line between lie and truth. It began with the first three Soviet lies, and then we finally come to the Apollo 7. So on October 11, 1968, Apollo 7 did a rendezvous with the S-IVB. So if you ever watch this, it's just so ridiculous. This, if you can go to YouTube and look Apollo 7 rendezvous Saturn IVB, it's such a ridiculous fake. You don't need to do it now. I'm trying to go quick through this, but just keep that in your reference for later. Just watch this Apollo 7 rendezvous. It's just ridiculous, like Star Wars of film, like just 1960s cheap, poor quality video effects. It's really sad. So actually, the fakery, American fakery, actually began on Apollo 7. So now, why though? This is a little bit strange because they're showing this fake piece of clip where the command module is getting very close to the SIVB, and then it kind of backs away, and it's totally fake.
I'm only
So,
laughing because I'm gonna show it when we're done. Oh
mhm,
man, this shit looks hilarious.
yeah, it's so pathetic. So, but the question is why? Why did they fake the? They Apollo 7, I believe that they went to the low Earth orbit, and they might have even docked with the thing. But why present us with a fake piece of film? My only theory regarding this is because they were just trying to see if they could get away with it. Can we actually present fake film to the public and get away with it? So Apollo 7 was the first trial of presenting the public with fake film, and the public bought it. So that's where the American fakery began, Apollo 7. Then you have Apollo 8 in December 21st, 1968. Total fakery. They claim the Apollo astronauts went and circled the moon. And then Apollo 9. This is where it gets even more interesting. on March 3rd, 1969, Apollo 9. So what's happening here is this. On Apollo 9, you have a mix of truth and reality. So what happened was you supposedly had the command module docking with the LEM, and then one guy exited the LEM and was standing on the outside of the craft, while the other guy stuck his head out of the command module. Now, the guy in the command module was supposedly filming the guy standing on the LEM, and the guy on the LEM was supposedly filming the guy whose head was stuck out of the command module. So the way they fake this is very interesting. They actually, this guy who was standing on the LEM was obviously a hoax. If you watch the Apollo 9, he's just standing there supposedly on the top of the LEM. And then so you've got this guy on the command module who's supposedly filming the guy on the LEM, and that's a fake. And then you have the guy on the LEM supposedly filming the command module. So the way they did that, they just had a camera mounted on the LEM, and that camera was filming the command module, and that part was real. He did stick his head out of the command module, but the lie was that was the guy standing on the LEM filming it. And you can tell that it's not the guy standing because the camera doesn't move at all the entire time. It's a fixed camera, and they're claiming that was the guy on the LEM who was filming it, but it wasn't. So that the Apollo 9 is a very interesting piece of trickery they tried to pull off there, you know. And then it just leads on to Apollo 10, you know, even more of the same baloney about, you know, how human beings can circle the moon and come back. And then again, it goes from there. Apollo 11, Apollo 12, Apollo 13, all the Apollo missions were fake, right? So, you know, that would have been my answer to the question on which Joe asked about where does the reality end and where does the fakery begin? We need to be very specific about this, right? All right. You have any
Absolutely.
questions?
No. I'm intrigued to follow these Apollo 7, 8, and 9 videos now
Yeah.
after we're done.
All right. So now it's 19 minutes into the interview, Joe Rogan does the Operation Starfish Prime section, right? Why was those guys blowing? So the most people who research the Apollo missions, well, there's an old tale that they were trying to blow a hole in the Van Allen belts to see if they could pass through the. I doubt that. This is just moon hoax conspiracy theorists who don't really understand science, because anybody who's a scientist would know that blowing up a nuclear bomb is not going to make a hole in the Van Allen belts. That would not have been their reasoning for doing this, you know. And even Joe Rogan asked then, what is the reason that America claims for blowing up these nuclear bombs in space? And he's asking Jamie, and Jamie doesn't know, and Joe Rogan. So that question never gets answered. So I'm going to try to answer that question, because the official excuse would be that the reason we were doing these what's called high altitude tests was just in response to the Soviets. So let's just go through the official story here. So on June 4th, 1961, was the failed Vienna summit between Kennedy and Khrushchev. Okay, so in 1961, Kennedy tried to meet with Khrushchev and said, okay, let's end this Cold War thing. Let's end this Cold War thing. And that failed because that same day began the Berlin crisis, where there was a big problems in Berlin over East Germany and West Germany. And so Khrushchev pulled away. No, there's no ending of the Cold War at this point. So that began, in 1961. And then in August of 1961, after this failed Vienna summit, the Soviets announced that they would continue testing of nuclear weapons. So there had been a test ban of nuclear weapons for many years, and then all of a sudden in 1961, supposedly the Soviets broke the test ban agreement and said, no, we're going to go ahead and continue testing. So then in September 15th, 1961, Kennedy was tricked into resuming nuclear testing as well. So Kennedy's advisors would say, okay, the Vienna summit failed, and so the Soviets have already started testing it again. We need to start testing again. So Kennedy was tricked into starting nuclear testing program again. On April 25, 1962, began a series called Operation Dominique, which was when the U.S. started blowing up nuclear bombs on land. And then in June began Operation Fishbowl. June of 1962 was Operation Fishbowl, and this was when they did high altitude nuclear tests. So there was two kinds of nuclear tests. One was done on the ground, where they just blew it up near the ground, and some were done where they blew it up in space. So the official excuse will be that the reason we started doing these tests is because the Soviets started doing these tests, and we can't fall behind them. So that was the reason why there's a blowing up of these things. So there, Operation Dominique, you can kind of search this on YouTube. Operation Dominique, there was 31 tests, 31 bombs they blew up on the ground. Operation Fishbowl, there was 5 tests done in June and July, and then 5 more tests done in October, November. But even if you search on Wikipedia, they're not clear whether or not these tests were carried out or not. They said, oh, I think the test was canceled. So there's a lot of blah, blah, blah about whether or not they actually canceled these tests or whether they continued it. But out of those 10 high altitude tests of Operation Fishbowl, 5 of them were confirmed. Yes, we did blow up bombs here at this altitude, blah, blah, blah. So this was the official excuse of blowing up bombs in the upper atmosphere. And it had nothing to do with the blowing a hole in the Van Allen belts. No scientist would ever propose that as a theory. Anybody would know that if radiation is the problem, you don't add to the problem by blowing up more radiation there. So anyway, this is my reply to the Operation Fishbowl, Operation Starfish Prime. Anyway, you can research these things. All right. So now, finally, we get here to 22 minutes and 45 seconds. Joe mentions the shape of the Van Allen belts, right? So this is a subject which, again, very, very controversial, because as most NASA apologists would say, is the Van Allen belts are shaped like a donut, and we just flew around the donut, right? Which I already debunked in my 12 smoking videos, right? The NASA documents showed that in one of the flights, they didn't even try to avoid the Van Allen belts. They just flew straight through it. So now let me come to the shape of the Van Allen belts, because it's a very important subject. Now, let me just show you. You know, the Earth is like floating through space, and it's being bombarded by cosmic radiation from every direction, right? North, south, east, west, up, down, everything. There's the space radiation bombarding the Earth. Now, there are some belts where some of the radiation gets trapped in an orbit around the Earth, right? So, but that's not where the thing is this. These Van Allen belts near the equator is where the Van Allen belts are farthest away from the Earth, and near the North Pole is where the Van Allen belts are closest to the Earth. Okay? You understand the shape of a magnetic field looks like this, right? A magnetic field creates this shape, yes?
A firm.
So that's why, right. So over here, the Van Allen belts are widest, and then they converge at the North Pole. So now you can search this on the internet, but there are many flights, long distance flights, which pass over Alaska and they pass close to the North Pole. And there's also some long distance flights which pass close to the South Pole. So there's an airline pilot safety guide which says that airline pilots are not allowed to fly near the poles on a regular basis. Okay? This is very interesting. A lot of moon landing researchers don't know this, but airline pilots have to if their flights go near the North Pole or the South Pole, they have to take mandatory breaks from work because they are exposed to much higher doses of radiation when they fly near the poles. And that is because the Van Allen belts are closer to the Earth near the poles, right? So a lot of people don't think this. A lot of people don't know that the Van Allen belts go from the North Pole to the South Pole. It's true that
That's kind
they're
of a
strong.
that would also be something to that goes against the flat Earth people. You know what I'm saying? What you just stated. I only touch on that because, and if we have time, I would like to ask you your your strongest points against the flat Earth, because I did have a show a short time ago with one of my friends. I agree with him on pretty much all the other conspiracies, 100%. And I trust this guy. He's a good dude, means extremely well, and he's into flat Earth. And I had him, all right, throw out your best arguments, and I told him, well, I'm not into flat Earth. I'm not convinced. I don't feel you guys make a good case, and so after you do your points, I would love to get your side, because with me, I like to show every side, and I want people to make their own decisions. At the end of the day, and who has the strongest argument for or against something. That's the way I look at things, and that's the way I look at just things in general, no matter what it is. So, if you don't mind, Dr. Raza, if you can give me your strongest arguments against the flat Earth model, that would be awesome.
You want to do that now or later?
Well, I don't know how many more points you had, or
Quite a few. Quite a few.
quite a few.
Quite a, yeah.
It's up to you. I
So
just don't want to, yeah, take too much of your
yeah,
time either.
but we can do that later. I just want to come back to my point about the Van Allen belts because um, it is stronger near the equators because some of the particles get trapped in orbit there, and but it's not like, see, what is it? James Van Allen said that if you want to avoid the Van Allen belts, you have to launch your ship from the North Pole, right? Bart Sibrel mentions this, that he's quoting James Van Allen, you should launch from the North Pole. But you see, this whole argument is kind of missing the point, because you see, it's not like once you're past the Van Allen belts, you're safe. No, I'm sorry. Even at the North Pole, you're exposed to even more of the cosmic radiation. So you, so this is one of the big mistakes of many moon landing researchers is when you say, "Oh, the Van Allen is the reason they had to fake it." It's no, that's wrong. It's not the Van Allen why they had to fake it. It's all the radiation outside of the Van Allen belts. And this is why the NASA apologists have such an easy time debunking us, because every time we mention radiation, they say, "Oh, the Van Allen belts, we flew around that." It's like, no, you're missing the point. The point is not the Van Allen belts. I have to say sorry on behalf of all the moon landing researchers became outperform me because they are the ones who keep talking about the Van Allen belts. But that's not the problem. The problem is all the radiation outside of the Van Allen belts. So flying around the belts is a solution to nothing. Launching from
Yeah,
the
you
North
can't
Pole
fly.
is
You
this.
can fly around it. There's radiation all over the goddamn place, is what
Yeah,
you're
there's
saying.
radiation. Right. So the whole argument is a straw man argument,
Mm,
and it's
that
due
makes
to
sense.
us moon, and it's due to us moon landing researchers who keep talking about the Van Allen belts. The more
Mm,
we talk about the Van Allen belts, the easier it is for the debunkers to debunk us because we have no idea what we're talking about. So that's
mm,
why I'm trying to educate people. It's not the Van Allen
yeah.
belts. Yes, the Van Allen belts are bad, but it's not like once you're past them, you're safe. No, that's completely wrong. And NASA
Mm.
is going to use our stupidity to make us
Against
look.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
All right.
get. With the way you explained it just now makes a hell of a lot more sense. I fell into that ignorant bunch, so I, y-
Well,
you know,
yeah.
I stand
Anyway,
corrected, and that's what you're here for, though, is to educate idiots like me. So that's awesome.
all right. So let's go to the next point. Now, this is actually quite interesting. So one of the so-called evidences which Bart presents is the Kelly Smith video. We have not, we do not have the technology yet to survive this deadly radiation of space. The Kelly Smith video. So and Joe asked him. He says, "When did this video come out?" And the Bart said, "I think it was 2014." So everybody knows the Kelly Smith video that we're talking about, right? Where he says human beings have not designed a solution to survive this deadly area of space. Everybody knows this video. So now the thing is this: NASA apologist will say, "Well, the reason that he said that is because we're trying a different thing now. In the past, we just made a quick trip to the moon. Now we're trying to set up a permanent base. So that's why we're doing it a different way now. That's why it's much more difficult now. That's why it's taking much longer now, is because we're not trying to make a short trip to the moon. We're trying to make a long trip to the moon. So we have to understand apologists and their arguments before we get into presenting evidence. If you so now regarding this thing, so Kelly Smith made this video about we haven't designed a ship to take us through the radiation in 2014, but you need to watch the 2016 video because in 2016, and her name is Dr. Catherine Fay. In 2016, Dr. and Catherine Fay announced that NASA has come up with a solution called the boron nitride nanotubes. So you can search this, Dr. Catherine Fay, boron nitride nanotubes, 2016. She made the announcement. Yes, we've discovered a method of manufacturing boron nitride nanotubes, and this is the radiation shielding material. So if you put this thing into context, Kelly Smith said we don't have the technology in 2014, but then Catherine Fay made the announcement we've discovered the radiation shielding material in 2016. So this is, again, most of the moon landing researchers don't know about this, but so you have to know the argument of the apologist. And if you say things like Bart said, well, they didn't have the shielding material in 2014, so that means they didn't have it today. But he just doesn't know what NASA has been doing since 2014. So yes, a lot of progress has been made on the radiation shielding, and that's why SpaceX is all gung ho now about about their Starship program. It's because they know exactly what radiation shielding to use, and they also know how many tanker ships it's going to take to fuel up the ship. Because this radiation shielding material is not. It's very heavy. It's not a lightweight stuff. So anyway, let's come back now to the Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's reply to the Kelly Smith thing was that, well, Kelly Smith said the radiation could damage the equipment, and that's what's making it dangerous to humans because the equipment could be damaged. But again, this whole theory, how could radiation damage equipment but not human beings? It's a silly. If any NASA apologist tries to make that excuse, the radiation could damage the film, but not damage the humans. The radiation could damage the other equipment, but not damage the human. It's total nonsense. No, human beings are the worst ones, to experience the effect of radiation, not equipment. Equipment was specifically. You should search one video on YouTube called "Is the Universe Hostile to Computers?" It's a very good video where they talk about the development of computers to adapt for the effect of space radiation. And it's not only in space. Computers are susceptible to space radiation here on Earth because the space radiation even comes down here to where we are down here. So, but they go into a very detailed discussion about how computers were designed to handle radiation. And the way they do it is inside of the chips. If a piece of radiation damages one of the transistors, then there's a backup circuit that will take over the function of that initial circuit until the initial circuit repairs itself. So that is the actual way they design equipment to handle the radiation of space, right? So for human beings, there's no backup DNA. Once your DNA gets destroyed, you're turned into a teenage mutant ninja turtle. So
Turtle power. Turtles in a half
all right,
shell. Every time you say that.
yeah. All right. So at at 29 minutes into the interview, Bart mentions Joe asks Bart, what was the radiation shielding material on the Apollo missions, and Bart says, well, there's 1/8 of an inch of aluminum. Okay, it's not actually true that there was many layers of different kinds of materials. So you need to be a little more familiar with the official story here of the Apollo missions. So yes, but whatever the official Apollo story is, it's just peanuts compared to what you would really need. Essentially, you can say there was no radiation protection material at all, and especially for somebody like me who studies radiation, space radiation, and shielding material. You can just basically say the Apollo ships had the zero radiation protection. A few layers of this or that is nothing. It does absolutely nothing to the radiation. It doesn't stop even one fraction of it. So let's go to the next point. Then Bart says he says that the NASA's own documents show that the radiation in the belts is 100 times the lethal dose. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, Bart. What is this NASA document you're talking about? They're admitting themselves. and then later in the interview, Joe Rogan actually pulls up an actual NASA
He
document,
fact checks them.
which, yeah, and thanks for that. But the thing is, and I was actually confused. Like, wait a minute, where was this NASA document? It turns out what Bart was talking about. He was talking about the Pioneer missions where they sent those probes up through the belt, and then and then some of the probes even malfunctioned because of the high levels of radiation. How he came up with this number 100 times the lethal dose, I don't know how he came up with that number, but there's no NASA document anywhere which says that the Apollo astronauts could not survive the Van Allen belts. There's no documented thing. All the NASA documents say, oh, the radiation doses were very small, and the dosimeter readings show that that it was just like a few X-rays. It was. So I haven't seen any NASA
Yeah.
documents which say that the radiation belts are 100 times the lethal dose. There's no documents like that. Okay, so shall I get next one is then on 30 minutes into the video, Bart says, Joe asked Bart, how many people have passed through the Van Allen belts? And Bart says 24 people. Okay, again, Bart's wrong here. It's not 24, it's 26 people who NASA claims have passed through the Van Allen belts. There was 27, but one of them went twice. So there's 26 humans which claim they passed through the Van Allen belts. 26 liars. Okay, and then we have now here it comes. We come 32 minutes into the interview. Comes Bart's the filming of the Earth through the window, right? The and the long discussion about this, right?
Yeah, see, I remember you brought it up on, or I think I brought it up on the smoking guns, and you're like, well, that's not really a smoking gun. And
Mm-mm.
I didn't understand why. I think I understand your point, so I'm sure you're going to make it clear now. But for me, it was huge the first time I saw it, and Bart showed it to me. And then, as he says in the Joe Rogan podcast over and over, in through his interactive website. Uh, it's just it's bananas to me. So this is the mindset where I'm coming from, and I'm sure you're gonna have your full rebuttal ready to go. But I'm just telling you, the glimpse in my mindset when I see that video, I'm like, holy shit, these astronauts are doing optical illusions within orbit. They're simulating an Earth, but they're completely within. They're not in outer space as we were led to believe. And then you have that whatever. I mean, Bart says it's a CIA agent saying, counting down 1, 2, 3, 4, speak, and then the astronaut responds at those commands. To me, that's damning as hell, man, because it clearly shows that they are rehearsing and staging something. Now, let's hear what you have to say about that.
Okay, so let's step back. When did this story begin? So what happened was one day a, a supposed whistleblower came to Bart and said, I have the video which proves it was a hoax. And then Bart tried to take that video clip to CNN, and that's when the CIA abducted him and the whole story begins. So and then eventually, he got out of his encampment, and then he took then the video to NBC, and then he said two NBC engineers agreed with him that this is the ultimate smoking gun, which proves the Apollo missions were a hoax. Now, yeah, this thing is not a smoking gun, but the fact that they were going through so much trouble to prevent Bart from taking it to CNN, it means that it is a touchy subject. So now the thing is this. that clip, okay, so that clip is on the NASA webpage now. NASA is not afraid of this clip at all. According to NASA, this clip is not proof of a hoax. NASA has no fear of showing this clip to the public. There's nothing on there which NASA is afraid of. It's right. You can just download and not only can you download you can download the whole clip, and you should watch the whole clip because Bart is only showing you little pieces of it. So in order to understand what's really going on, you have to watch the whole clip. Now, the only question I have left is this: is the clip which Bart received different from the clip which is on the NASA webpage today? So that I'm not sure of. It may be that the only difference is this other voice which comes in and says, speak. The Bart keeps referring to the third party
Yeah,
tells
yeah,
him to
yeah. The
speak.
the
So
countdown 1, 2, 3, 4 speak.
yeah, right. So I don't actually know. See, Bart is like taking clips out of this thing, and I don't know
You
where
got to
is
see the
this
whole thing,
supposed.
is what you're saying.
Right, you have to see
So
the whole thing
so you have the full context. They kind of make sense, and it's kind of similar to the JFK Zapruder film. There are frames missing. Why were those frames removed? You know what I'm saying? Um, and so this is around the same time frame if we're really thinking about it. The 60s. Damn. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, you do definitely put that in a different perspective. Before I heard what you had to say, I wanted to tell you where I'm coming from. You see this, it looks like the astronauts are clearly staging uh, a, a, a picture of the Earth while they're within the atmosphere. And then what you're saying is we need to see the whole clip, the
right,
whole context behind it, and then make you
right,
know, a better
right.
informed
Well,
observation.
let me finish here. So we started a new thread in our Facebook group where there's some very good members in the group now, some very smart and people who understand physics, and we're working together to know the difference between a real smoking gun and what's not a smoking gun. So we have to ask ourselves, well, what would be the apologist excuse? And even Joe Rogan mentions that in the interview, like, what is the excuse that NASA has for this? It looks so fake. So how can they explain this to be real? So you really have to understand the apologist point of view. And in order to understand the apologist point of view, you have to look at the entire clip from beginning to end. And you can see that, yes, they are inside the capsule and they're floating around in zero G, and they kind of come close to the window and there's the Earth, and they come back and the Earth is still there. And the Earth actually passes from one window to another window. Okay. So if you watch the whole clip, it actually is quite difficult to explain. It does look real if you watch the whole thing. Now, how did they do this? How did they fake it? Now, this is where I have a theory. Now, here's the way they did it. So they had the astronauts floating around in low Earth orbit, and then they block out the windows, and then they say, okay, now we're going to zoom into the Earth. But what they did was, at that moment when they start showing the Earth out of the window, that particular clip was filmed on Earth. So they switched between a live clip in lunar orbit to a pre-recorded clip which they filmed on Earth. So what they did was, on Earth, they had the command module, and they had a light outside of the command module which looked like the Earth. It was a fake Earth light outside of the command module, because you can see the inside of the command module, and then you can see the light outside of the Earth, outside of the window, and the Earth actually passes from one window to another window. So it is a real thing that looks like an Earth, and all this question about whether does it fill up the window or not, it's ridiculous. You have to watch the entire thing. So there's a fake Earth, and then they all of a sudden switch back to the live feed of them in low Earth orbit. So this is how they faked it. They were able to switch between live feed and pre-recorded clips, and that's how they faked the entire thing. When they came into lunar orbit, they just switched to pre-recorded clips. And if you study the lunar orbit images, you can see the exact moment when they switch from real to fake. Maybe we could do a separate show about this, but I could show you exactly where they switch
We
from
could do
real to
that on
fake.
our Smoking Guns Part
So
2
this
for
is the
sure.
way they filmed it. Yeah, yeah. So so this is how they did it. I'm pretty sure, they had this fake Earth, which was just a light bulb that was painted to look like the Earth. Now, here's the thing: is this Bart says that this is the ultimate smoking gun. Now, why is it a smoking gun? Uh, I haven't really figured out why he thinks it's. I guess because the CIA is the third party which tells him to speak, and because the CIA tells him to speak, that's why it's a smoking gun. Okay, no. So if you want to know why that video clip which Bart has is damning, then you have to look at the pattern of the clouds on the Earth. Okay, I'm trying to help Bart here. He has a smoking gun, but he's presenting it the wrong way. The right way to present this smoking gun: look at the cloud patterns of the video Earth compared to the cloud patterns of the photographed Earth. Because the same time they were filming the Earth through the video camera, they were also snapping images of the Earth through the Hasselblads. And the cloud pattern on the video Earth and the Hasselblad Earth is a different cloud pattern. This is the
Mm,
smoking gun. This proves
mm,
that it's a fake. And Bart never
mm.
mentions the cloud because he never took the time. And I just made a post in my group, Facebook
I
group,
did see that. Yeah.
comparing the cloud patterns. This is the smoking gun of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. God damn.
All
That
right,
don't.
so I think we,
I don't expect anything less from you, Doctor Razum. Dropping
all
those
right.
truth bombs as per usual.
Uh, all right, so we covered the footage of the Earth outside of the window, and so there's still a few other points. Like Bart mentions the Gus Grissom incident, right? So I want to say this. Um, in the future, NASA has plans to admit they faked the moon landing. And one of the first big public admissions was the 2014, the film Interstellar, right? You've seen that Interstellar 2014?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
called the
Yeah.
Murph's school scene, where he walks into the school and the principal sits down and says, "Look, Murph brought in this old book which said the Apollo missions were real, and she got in trouble for that because that's an old book." And then the actor is like, "What? The Apollo missions weren't real?" And they said, "Yeah, we faked it to beat the Russians." Okay, so this is going to be the thing. When NASA does admit it, they're going to say, "We faked it to beat the Russians. It's an American thing. We had to beat the Russians because of the Cold War." Now, the thing is this: somebody will say, "Well, then wait a minute. What about Gus Grissom?" And of course, the reply, "Well, that was just an accident. We didn't know that the thing was going to blow up. And now I want to talk a little bit more detail here, because Bart also makes some kind of mistakes here. And uh, now the thing is this: Bart puts forward the idea that the reason that they killed Gus Grissom is because they were they were planning on making a fake moon mission, and they knew that Gus wouldn't agree with that. Okay, are you following me here? This is what Bart says. The reason they killed Gus is because in NASA was planning on faking it, and Gus would have never gone along. This is a
Yeah.
totally wrong.
He
This is a,
basically he was a whistleblower. Is what he was getting at, right?
well, kind of, but not really. No, let me just say it one more time, just to be clear. At the time that Gus was killed, NASA still hadn't devised a plan whether to fake it or not, and they got rid of Gus so that they could move ahead with their plan of faking it. So this is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. And I did a video series to cover this. Now, Gus Grissom knew about the plans of faking it ever since 1962. Okay. NASA decided to fake it in 1962. And Gus Grissom was a high level Freemason. And Gus Grissom was all okay with the plans for faking it all the way up until his death. He was okay. He was going along. Yes, we're going to fake this thing. Gus knew that ever since 1962. Okay. He was a high level Freemason. He knew they were going to fake it. And now, but why did they kill them? I do believe that Gus was intentionally killed. But why? Yes, he did hang the lemon. And that was, he hung the lemon, which was kind of a whistleblower thing. But now the thing is this, he was kind of toying around with the idea of whistleblowing. And he wasn't the only one. You see, Charlie Duke, when he was on his mission, he made a quote. He's speaking onto the microphone. He says, when I look out the window and I see the moon and no stars in the background, it looks so fake. It looks like we're filming this in a studio. And he said this right there live on the Apollo mission, that it looks fake, So he's also toying around with the idea of blowing the whistle. But as you know, Charlie Duke is still alive today. He's a hero, So he never blew the whistle. But they like these little games where they're toying around with the idea of blowing the whistle. We're going to say things that make it seem like a whistleblower. It's not, So
Would you
I'm
say
not,
like something like the Stanley Kubrick's what was it? The Shining would be something along those lines, where
of a
there's a shit
whistleblower.
ton of NASA Easter eggs all throughout the damn movie.
Yeah, not only that, I mean the Stanley Kubrick insisting that the release date of Eyes Wide Shut be on the launch of the Apollo missions. But there's some other examples of these kind of people who are sort of blowing the whistle but not really blowing the whistle. Um so
But then you have the
I
real
do.
ones that get suicided, kind of like the Boeing guys. Thomas Barron. Thomas
Right, I
Barron
was gonna.
was
Right.
due to testify, and he was going to be talking about the safety of like, there's no way in hell we should be launching humans into space. It's not ready. And then a goddamn train crashes through his
Yeah.
house.
6
What
days
the
after.
fuck?
Right. So
It's
this is the thing.
insane.
So this is the thing, like I said, NASA is going to admit they faked the moon landing. And when they do that, they're going to say, well, Gus Grissom was an accident, and Thomas Barron, well, it was just a coincidence that he died in the crane crash 6 days after he was about to, submitted his testimony. So yeah, they're going to have a hard time explaining Gus Grissom and Thomas Barron. But anyway, let's keep going, okay? So
Absolutely.
mm, another point at 1 hour and 10 minutes into the show, Bart says that one of the ways they killed Gus was that they made the excuse that we're testing out a pure oxygen environment, and the flame would be much more combustible in a pure oxygen environment. But see, this is wrong, because a pure oxygen environment had been used all along. NASA has always used a pure oxygen environment. So it wasn't just a special way to get rid of Gus. No. They've been using a pure oxygen environment all along.
Mm.
In fact, maybe I should even go into a little more detail. What do you mean here when you say pure oxygen environment is that there's a balance between O2 and CO2, right? You breathe out CO2, you breathe in O2, and then there's a sensor which can monitor the levels of the CO2 and the O2. And so then when the CO2 gets too high, you have to replace the CO2 scrubbers. Those are the ones that remove the CO2 from the air. So the CO2 scrubbers are what helps to maintain the balance between O2 and CO2. This is the actual science of a spacecraft, and that's been going on like that ever since the Gemini missions and things like that. So there's no smoking guns here, and NASA has always used pure oxygen to balance out the CO2, and they've always used oxygen scrubbers, CO2 scrubbers to remove the. It's the same technology you use on submarines, right? Submarine goes under the ocean. They use the same technology as the Apollo mission spaceship because you have to maintain the balance between oxygen and CO2. Okay, so now let's come here. Okay, now at 1 hour and 20 minutes into the interview, Bart says that Joe brings up the question of retroreflectors on the moon, and then the Bart says, "Well, they've been bouncing lasers off the moon without the retroreflectors." So this is a very, very wrong argument to use. Okay, it's a very and many moon landing researchers use this argument. I get it in my group all the time. Whenever somebody brings up laser reflectors, they say, they've been bouncing lasers without the reflectors. This is the wrong argument. Okay, so the right argument is that the laser reflectors were placed down by unmanned crafts. A laser reflector on the moon is not proof of a manned craft, right? Because you can do that with unmanned crafts. And regarding this bouncing a laser off the moon, okay, I know about these things. I know the people here in China who have bounced laser reflectors off of the Apollo laser reflectors. So now we know the difference between what we call a surface bounce and a laser reflector bounce. We know the difference. If you're bouncing a laser off of a lunar surface, it brings back one signal. And if you actually manage to hit one of the reflectors, a different signal comes back. So we know the difference between a surface bounce and a laser reflector bounce. So that's why it's a wrong argument to say, oh, we can bounce laser without a reflector. No, I'm sorry. Scientists know the difference between a surface bounce and a laser reflector bounce.
What is that
So
difference? If you don't, if
it's
you
just a
can,
much brighter return signal.
mm,
When you bounce a laser off the moon, you can only get a certain brightness because of the return signal. It's degraded due to the reflectivity of the lunar surface.
mm.
So if you find one object which is a much brighter reflection, it means you found a laser reflector. And so we know they're there, but this is not proof that the human beings put it down, right? This is just
Can I
proof
ask
that.
you real quick? It's similar to what you're talking about right now. Another thing that NASA apologists will sometimes say is we can see the landing sites, um, and what they'll do, they'll refer you to a website by NASA, and it says, "Look, you can look at the landing sites right here." My argument, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to be accurate and correct as possible. But my argument to that is I can't go to a third party website or independent website. I have to use their freaking website for this shit. How do I not? I mean, it would be so easy to fake these images of these landing sites. That's the way I look at it. Um, what? How do you address that, Doctor Raza?
Well, so there's two kind of NASA trolls, and some are the very professional ones, and some are the really just fanboys who don't know what they're talking about, and they say
Like
stupid
Richard
things.
Brandt?
Actually, that guy, I don't know. He tried hard,
Uh,
but um,
yeah.
so anyway, some of the really not so bright NASA trolls, if whenever they bring up what they say, well, you can see the landing sites here on Earth. It's like, no, I'm sorry, you cannot. If you just do what of a 20-second Google search, you will see that the size of a telescope in that to be big enough to see the landing site has to be so incredibly large. It would be impossible to build that here on Earth. So no, there's no, and even I posted this to my group many years ago. So we have images of the Apollo landing sites. So there's many web pages which say how to find the Apollo landing sites with your telescope. There's many pages which say that, and that's why stupid people say that you can see it here on Earth. You cannot see it here on Earth. What you can find is point your camera into the right area where the ship supposedly landed. That's what they mean. You can find the Apollo landing site. It's like this part of the moon, but you can't see anything there, of course.
Hmm.
And some of the and I have so the largest, I have two images from the largest telescopes on Earth, which were pointed at the Apollo landing sites, and you can't see anything there. And then there's the Hubble. They also pointed the Hubble at the Apollo landing sites. It's called Hubble Shoots the Moon. And if you go to that webpage, NASA explains why Hubble can't even see the landing sites. Many NASA researchers will say, well, why doesn't NASA just point the Hubble there? They did, okay? It's just that the Hubble doesn't have that ability to see that. So that's true. The Hubble can't see it. It has to be the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. And like you said, so whenever they say, well, we have pictures coming from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, but that's the fox which guards the hen house. Of course, NASA is going to say, "Oh yeah, we have pictures of the landing site." So yeah. Okay, let me move on to the
That's kind of
next.
funny because real
Mm,
quick, it's just without me doing any research, I'm just using reason and logic, and that's the conclusion that I came with. Like
right,
you're
right.
using you have to see these things through their media. You know, it would be easy as hell to fake all this crap.
Mm, all right. Let me come into the next point. At 1 hour 27 minutes, Joe Rogan says we have eyewitnesses from the factory where Von Braun was working, where there was 5 corpses hanging there. And the Joe Rogan says that was real. We know that was real because we have eyewitnesses. Okay. Eyewitnesses during the Holocaust, which was the biggest lied about event in history. It makes the moon landing look pale in comparison. So
The
yeah,
Rousey dropping
eyewitnesses from
truth
the Holocaust.
bombs.
Okay, sorry, but
No, you're good. You can
yeah,
say whatever you want on my channel.
eyewitnesses from World War II. Please take that with a grain of salt, okay? Because you know. Anyhow, let's go to the next point. Uh, okay, now in 1 hour 30 minutes, Joe Rogan talks about the flag blowing in the breeze. Okay, actually, the American moon does a very good job on this. They're talking about, um, yeah, if his hand is on the pole and the flag is moving, that can kind of be explained because his hand is making the flag wave. And then there's the scenes where there's nobody touching the flag, but it still moves, right? So then the excuse the NASA would say is that this is just a static electric charge, right? The static electric charge of the dust on his suit is affecting the static electric charge of the dust on the flag. So this is so maybe, but even then, but then there's another video clip where there's not even any astronauts anywhere nearby, not even passing they're in the ship already, and the flag moves. But again, the NASA excuse here would be that, well, at that point when the flag moved, is because they turned on the AC, and the AC started pushing out air, and that's what made the flag move. Okay, but then the problem is that the flag moves back into position. So if you turn on the AC and it moves the flag one way, how is the flag going to come back unless you have a vacuum of pulling it? Unless you turn on some kind of reverse flow. Like I said, you cannot be a force in the opposite direction unless there's an opposite force causing it to move that way. So this is the real smoking gun of the flag waving scene, is where there's that one scene where there's no astronauts anywhere and the flag moves and then it moves back, and that's where they really screwed up. The rest of the flag waving scenes are not smoking guns at all. Okay, so let's come back here now. At 1 hour 43 minutes, the Joe starts getting into this discussion about the delay time, right? And especially with the Apollo 17 liftoff, and how much delay time would be there. And they're throwing around all these numbers. Sometimes they say a 5-second delay time. Sometimes it's a 12-second delay and stuff like. No. It's a it's a 3.6 second delay, which should be there. I'm sorry. It's a I keep forgetting this number myself as well, so I have to forgive them for throwing around these random numbers. But what you can just Google that. What is the speed of light between the Earth and the Moon? Speed of light between Earth and Moon. About 2.5 seconds, right? So 2.5 going one way and 2.5 coming back. So yeah, that is a 5-second delay. But then the Bart says, well, with the analog equipment and things like that. Wait a minute, what analog? No. I don't know why Bart says this analog equipment comment. No, they were using digital equipment. There's a couple times in the interview where Bart mentions the analog computers of NASA. No. Analog computers existed back in the 50s. They replaced it with digital computers back in the 50s. So NASA was definitely using digital computers, not analog computers. Is that what you're seeing also? Did you look up something? Speed of.
So what I got was 1.25 seconds, Earth to Moon.
1.25. Right,
Yep.
1.25. So you double that is. So yeah, so it is around 2.6. So 1 point, we'll just call it 1.3. That's the number I used to use. 1.25, whatever. So let's just call it 1.3 there, 1.3 coming back. So that's a 2.6 second delay, which takes for the speed of light to travel there and to travel back. So we did a discussion of this on the 12 Smoking Gun interview, where there's these missing delays, and if a NASA says something, the reply cannot come back from the moon until 2.6 seconds later, right? That's very clear. Science says that, and it has nothing to do with analog or anything like that. This is all digital equipment, and so signal would travel at the speed of light. Okay, so let's go to the next point. Joe, at 1 hour 44 seconds, Joe says, "Where's the flames? Where's the fire coming out of the ship as it launches off?" So again, this kind of a I did this in the 12 Smoking Guns. I said, it's not a flame you would see, it's a steam, it's a gust of steam. We talked about the chemical equation, how you would see steam, how you see steam on the Soyuz missions. You would not see flame. So if a moon researcher uses this as a proof that there's no flame coming out, he's making himself look stupid, because you should not see flame. There's no flames
Why
in
why do we
space.
see the digital sparks though? That's my question.
Right. So what you're seeing supposedly is, I also did another video specifically on this with the Apollo detectives. So what they did was they had a blast where parts of the ships blasted off, right? So as these little pieces of the ships pass through the air, you have a red, yellow, blue color camera. So then you get these red, yellow, blue rainbow tracers as the object passes by at a higher speed. So
Mm.
so the official story is that you have the ship, as it took off, it blasted the lower half and parts of the ship blew off. And me and the Apollo detectives, we found some very interesting smoking guns in there, because the pieces, when you look through the window, you can see pieces of the ship flying off, but some of the pieces of the ship are coming from the wrong directions. So so my the Apollo detectives, the person who makes those video is a Hollywood insider, and so he told me that the trick that they used here is called a shrapnel cannon. In Hollywood, the name for this blasting out of certain parts in Hollywood when they make these scenes is called the using a shrapnel cannon. And it's just little explosives that send objects flying, which you can time to and direct them in whatever direction you want. So yeah, there are some smoking guns in that, but it's not just like, oh, the rainbow sparklers and stuff. You actually have to analyze each piece of the ship and which direction it's coming from, in order to see that. No, they kind of goofed up here, because they had the pieces of the ship flying in the wrong direction. So it's kind of we'll do that in our smoking guns too, because this is a long subject. All right. Neil Armstrong crashes the lunar lander. Okay, 1 hour 46. Bart talks about how Neil Armstrong crashes the training vehicle, right? So again, when moon landing researchers uh, bring up subject like that, because I hear it in my group all the time. Oh, they crashed the only training vehicle. This just makes us look stupid, because there was many, many, many flights that he flew, and only one of the flights where he crashed. You know, so to say that he crashed the only flight is a totally false statement. They flew many times successfully, and one time they crashed. So this is not a proof of a hoax. Okay, so please study these things before you make these kind of proofs of a hoax. Okay, you still follow me on that point?
Yeah, 100%.
Mm, mm.
Can you hear me?
All right, the next point is yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you hear me?
I think we
Okay.
have a little bit of a
All right, so
delay.
the next point, yeah. Okay, so another point, please, I'm just telling this for all the moon landing researchers, please be careful about the things you say. So if we make statements like this, NASA destroyed all the documents. Wait a minute. No, 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 that's not what were the actual documents which were destroyed? Okay? We have to be very specific about these things. So they have all the schematics for the Saturn V. They have the schematics for the command module. They have the schematics for the lunar rover. The only thing they destroyed was the schematics for the LEM. Okay, the schematic Northrop Grumman decided to destroy the schematics for the LEM. That was the part they were worried that would leak out. And they did destroy the telemetry data. You know, when you're talking about these thousands of reels, yeah, they destroyed or they lost. That's their official word. We lost that telemetry data. And then I don't know. There was this one reel of the original Apollo 11, and I can't remember what happened. They found different versions of it. You know, so. Can you bring up that document? You have that document where they destroyed 2,500 reels. Oh.
Yeah, here we go. It's by Reuters, written in
Uh-huh.
2009. The original recordings of humans landing on the moon 40 years ago were erased and reused, but newly restored copies of the original broadcast look even better, NASA officials said on Thursday. NASA released the first glimpses of a complete digital makeover of the original landing footage that clarifies the blurry and grainy images of Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin walking on the surface of the moon. The full set of recordings, being cleaned up by Burbank, California based Lowry Digital, will be released in September. The preview is available at nasa.gov. NASA admitted in 2006 that no one could find the original video recordings of the July 20, 1969 landing. Since then, Richard Nafsker, an engineer at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland, who oversaw television processing at the ground tracking sites during the Apollo 11 mission, has been looking for them. The good news is he found where they went. The bad news is they were part of a batch of 200,000 tapes that were degaussed, magnetically erased, and reused to save money.
Okay,
The goal was
200,000.
live TV. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
it's laughable.
So right. So but we have to understand the official story here is that so they just they degaussed 200,000 tapes. But the excuse that they're going to be was that, well, most of these tapes were not Apollo mission tapes. There was some earlier tapes and some later tapes, different missions, and we decided that whatever excuse they're going to make, and it just so happened that one Apollo tape got in there, and we accidentally degaussed that. So that's going to be there. So what
But
did they lose?
but
Okay,
I guess I would debunk that in my simple terms is this is mankind's greatest achievement, and they had to save budget. They also spent, in equivalent to today's money, billions of fucking dollars on this project, and they had to save money by reusing and erasing tapes. It's pathetic. And again, this is just coming from quote unquote a garbage man, reading this damn article. It's a joke.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, like to be very specific about what they lost. So this original recording of the Apollo 11 landing taken from outside. So you have to remember there was the inside camera looking down and the outside camera looking back. So it was just one of the tapes of the outside camera which they lost, and then they lost the telemetry data, and then they lost the schematics for the LEM. These are the three things they lost. So we should be a little bit more specific than saying, "Oh, NASA lost everything" or "NASA destroyed everything." We need to be very specific here, or else we're making fools of ourselves. Okay, so next point. Let's see. Oh, here's another one. At 1 minute, they ran the AC of the LEM on a bank of car batteries. Sorry. No, 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 no. You have to understand. You have to know the official story. Okay, the batteries are very, very, very specific. Silver batteries with made with silver inside. Very expensive. This is not just car batteries that they used. Okay, these are very specific space batteries, which have been used on satellites. Ever since the 1950s. These silver batteries is very expensive, and they only use it on space missions because silver batteries are designed to carry the most amount of power in the smallest place. And it can also survive the harsh environments of space. So using this batteries to, when you say something like, where they just used a bunch of car batteries. No, 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 no. They didn't use car batteries. Please, if you're gonna present proofs of a hoax, you should understand the official story, right, before you make statements like that, because otherwise we kind of look bad. All right, next. And then he also said, how could those batteries survive at 250 degrees outside? Again, okay, so we're not understanding the temperature problems. So the official story is that NASA landed the crafts just at the lunar dawn. It means when the sun was rising, they landed the craft there at that space where the sun had just come up, because that is the coldest time to be on the Earth. I'm sorry. That's the coldest time to be on the moon, is right at the sunrise, right? So now they took steps, because if NASA is not stupid. If they said, "Oh, we landed right at the midday," that's the hottest time to be on the moon, and so naturally everything would just melt at that point. So NASA is not stupid. So that's why they made the story that we landed at the lunar sunrise, because that's the coldest time, and it takes 13 days to go from maximum cold to maximum heat. So please, don't say 250 degrees, because that's many, many days later after you have to understand the official story before you can start presenting arguments against it. Okay. Okay, next point. Now at 1 hour 52 minutes, Joe Rogan asked the question about the Apollo 17 liftoff, and Joe Rogan says, could they have done that remote control? So, so this is actually a kind of a very important question, because and of course Bart doesn't answer, but yes, they definitely could. So let's come back to the question of how did they fake this thing, right? Now, for me, I after 2019, I decided that I'm going to be a whistleblower. I'm going to tell my story. And then what I did is I went to the modern NASA webpage, Apollo Lunar Surface Journal, and I downloaded all, like, was 8,000 photographs from their webpage, and I started examining them. And what's happening is you have a craft going to the moon and then coming back to the Earth. You know, so for me as a scientist, the first thing I want to do is, are there any smoking guns in these images of the ship approaching the Earth, the ship leaving the Earth, the ship approaching the moon, the ship leaving the moon? Are there any smoking guns here? And the way you can tell that it's a smoking gun is due to the what's called the terminator line. You know what I mean? The terminator, where does the earth shadow when it's not in sunlight anymore? That point between daytime and nighttime, we call that the terminator line. So according to the as a scientist, I've done this where I calculate exactly where the ship should be, where the earth should be, where the moon should be, where the sun should be, what part of the earth is in daytime, what part of the moon is in daytime, what part of the moon is in night, what part of the earth is. We can calculate these things according to the exact time and the position. We can run that into the time and day. You can see on July 16th, what was the lunar phase? Was the moon a quarter moon? Was it a half moon? Was it a crescent moon, a waning, waxing? We can calculate all these things. So NASA did an extremely good job when they faked this thing, because they had calculated exactly the way the earth should be, and where the terminator should, what the angle of the earth should be. They did an extremely good job of calculating. And I checked, thousands of images, and checking every picture where the earth is there, every picture where the moon is there. Is the shadow right? Is the So now the thing is this: after doing all this research, I came to the conclusion of how did they fake this thing, is that they had unmanned crafts going to the moon, and those unmanned crafts were taking pictures of the moon, taking pictures of the earth. There's thousands and thousands of pictures of the earth and the moon, and those are real images. The only thing is they were not taken by a man looking out of a window holding a camera. Okay, these pictures are way too good to be a man sitting in a window holding a camera. This is taken by an unmanned craft, which was taking very clear images of the earth and the moon along the journey. So that's something that more moon landing researchers need to research, is how did they fake this thing, and look at these. There's thousands of images of the earth and the moon, and these are scientifically correct. We can calculate that the sun and the moon and the earth are in the right positions. But at one point they switch over to fake something which was filmed on earth. So this is where, so it was an unmanned craft, and they were able to land, and then they were able to even scoop up rocks and bring it back to Earth, because some of the moon rocks are real and some of the moon rocks are fake. Means they picked it up in Antarctica, right? But some of the moon rocks are real. And so that means, yes, they did have the technology to send a remote control craft to the moon, scoop up rocks, and come back to Earth. They did have that technology. And they also placed down the retroreflectors. They could scoop up Earth, scoop up the moon rocks, place down the reflectors, come back to Earth. And that's how they pulled it off. Even if they would have asked Kubrick, let's just give the theory that NASA asked Kubrick, how can we fake this thing? Kubrick says, in order to fake it, you need to have real moon rocks and real moon reflectors. And then you can claim that those things were done by human hands. And that's how NASA did it. They had to have real moon rocks and they had to have real reflectors. And other experiments, they put down seismic detectors, right? They put down seismic detector equipment and other equipment. So they did have unmanned crafts to do these things. So, but that's how they faked it. They did the stuff with unmanned crafts, and then later claim, oh, it was humans that did that. Right.
Although they did throw in some wood, petrified wood rocks in the
Yeah,
batch.
that was a point I just kind of, I don't know if I skipped it or I haven't got there yet, But we're coming to that part about the fake moon rock, which was presented to Amsterdam, right?
Yeah.
So this story is a little bit strange, and so from my research, what it's showing is that what is the official excuse? The official excuse was that given to the Amsterdam by an ex-U.S. senator. This is the official story. It was not given by Neil Armstrong. It was given by a U.S. senator, and then they said, "Where did that U.S. senator get it from? They don't know." Was so that's the official story of why a piece of petrified wood was given to a Dutch museum, is because some US senator made a mistake and presented something which he thought was a moon rock, but it wasn't. It was a piece of petrified wood, and he doesn't even remember where he got that piece of petrified wood from. So that's the
Yeah.
official
I
story.
yeah, I have David McGowan's audiobook on my podcast player, and David McGowan was a legitimate reporter that went balls deep into a lot of these conspiracies. Uh, he was a legendary reporter. But yeah, in that book, if I remember correctly, I need to go listen to it again. He basically talks about how a lot of these moon rocks soon afterwards went missing, and he pretty much suggests that these other entities that held these moon rocks didn't want to go through the same embarrassment of running into the chance that they also had petrified wood, and so they went missing, and the story's gone quiet, and that
Mhm.
seems to make a lot of damn sense.
Well, it like I said, probably my theory here is that when they went down to Antarctica to look for moon rocks, they actually
Mm.
well, I don't know. I don't
That
know
that's
if
that's
petrified
what I
wood.
think. The real
Mm,
moon rocks, quote unquote, that's where I my theory is that they came from shit that already, asteroids that they found here on Earth already, and those were presented as
right,
moon rocks.
right. So there's I want to just tell you one other story so you can research later. But there's one story where on the Apollo 11, Neil and Buzz were picking up rocks, and then suddenly, just as they were about to get into the ship and take off back to Earth, Buzz or Neil or somebody all of a sudden decided to just use his scooper, scoop up a pile of dirt, and place it in a bag and bring a one small little bag of dirt back, aside from all the rocks, right? So, if you ask my opinion, that one small scoop of dirt was real, and the moon rocks were picked up from Antarctica. So that's
One
how
small
they
scoop
knew.
for man, one giant
Right,
scoop for all bullshit kind.
right.
Yeah.
So and then later, just like I'm forgetting the year, but just a few years ago, NASA announced we're opening up one canister, which has been sealed ever since the Apollo missions. Right? You saw that story just a few years
No, I
ago.
haven't seen it.
Okay, you can search it later. NASA just a few years ago decided to open up because now we have the technology to really examine this stuff where we didn't have it then. So we left that canister sealed ever since the Apollo missions. So that's also a real thing. They sent an unmanned craft, they drilled down, they put it in a sealed canister, and they brought it back to Earth. And that was just recently opened. So there are definitely real lunar samples which have been brought back to Earth. I mean, the Russians did it with unmanned crafts, right? The Russians could bring back lunar samples, and so America's way ahead of the Russians. At least 10 years ahead of them in everything. So let me come back to my last few points here. During the Joe Rogan interview, Bart mentions the Smarter Every Day interview where he says, "Oh, this guy just said we need a few days before his Joe Rogan interview." I said, "Bart, you got to see this Smarter Every Day." And I tried to tell Bart, I said, "There's 15 ships," but I don't know. Somehow he just forgot that and mentioned 9 ships. But actually,
Yeah.
no. And if you read the document, it's more than 15. It says
Yeah,
high
that's
teens,
15 is at
at
least.
least 15.
Yeah, so
And
that
then
number could be well in the 20s for all we know.
right, who knows how much. Okay, and now at the 2 hours into the interview, Joe brings up Bart's intersecting shadows image,
Yeah.
and if you watch my Smoking Guns, it's I try to tell people, please, if you're going to present evidence of a hoax, do not use images where the sun is at your back or in your face, because that's going to create perspective, right? I've been, for so many years, I've been trying to advise moon landing researchers, please, if you're going to use the shadows as your proof of a hoax, please don't use images which provide perspective. And also, American Moon does a long section on this where they're talking about perspective. If the sun's at your back, if the sun's at your front, you're going to get perspective. So, anyway, but Bart proceeded to present this image. I think you did too on one of your other shows. You presented that same image, which Bart uses, where the sun is at your back and the rocks shadows are intersecting. This is just
Oh, you froze up.
perspective. It's
Hold
not
up,
a
hold up.
smoking
You
gun.
can you repeat what you just
It
said? You
kind of
froze
goes
up.
back to Jera. Actually, Jera was
You're freezing up right now, Dr.
okay.
Raza. Hold up 1 second.
Yeah. So this image,
You're froze up on my screen. You're doing a gnarly face. I don't know if you can hear me, but you froze up.
oh,
Yeah, yeah. Restart.
yeah.
Uh oh. Dr. Raza is into the Ethernet. He will be right back after these short messages. Hope you guys are enjoying
Think
this.
Rockfin is trying
I'm
to stop us or what?
yeah. You. I wonder if there you go. I could. You're good now. I can hear. I can see you, but you look blurry as shit.
All right. Let me try one more time again. Hear me?
Man, the audio is getting real
Can you
bad
hear
right
me?
now. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. It's looking good from my side. So let me just try one more time to go through this. So it was actually this intersecting shadows, which Bart is presenting, was actually first talked about by Jera White many, many, many years ago. And Jera White brought this image into a university there in Australia. And one of the scientists at the university said, I can't explain why these shadows are intersecting. So Jera was convinced that that was a smoking gun, and Bart was convinced that's a smoking gun. But this is not a smoking gun. In order to be a smoking gun, you cannot be with the sun at your back, because then the shadows will have perspective. And American Moon goes into great detail about that. So anyway, let me try to get into the last few points here.
Yep.
Um, so at 2 hours and 13 minutes into the interview,
Oh man, I think I think Black Ops is taking over, and they're trying to not let you finish the
Joe
last
asked the
points.
question, well, where can we find the? Oh,
Yeah, you're breaking up real bad right now.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay,
Let
try
me
that
start
again.
again.
Yeah.
Oops. Um, let's try one more time. So at 2 hours and 13 minutes into the video, Joe Rogan asked the question, where can we find the original images in order to compare it with the modern day images? He went into the archives to find what are the real original images. If I would have been on the Joe Rogan show, I would have answered because the Bart didn't answer. Joe says, where can we find where can we search on he asked original image, and nobody can answer to him. So if I would have been there, I would have told upload, and then you can know which was the original. Next point. So it 2 hours and 15 minutes. Joe asked the question about there's two scenes filmed many miles apart, but the same background is used. And I think what Joe is doing is he's quoting what happened on the moon. There's another documentary, right? As we know, in 2001, two documentaries came out. Bart Sibrel's A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, and then this What Happened on the Moon was this where they did a lot more. Actually, that was the one which got me thinking, in 2001 when I watched those two documentaries, it wasn't Bart's documentary which convinced me. It was the other documentary, What Happened on the Moon. And there they present some strong evidence, and so one of them being this. It was the Fox News that also came out in 2001. The Fox News where they said, "Oh, these two scenes have the same background." But I haven't actually found those clips. I don't know where Fox got that. Fox might be kind of a controlled op here because, they're saying, well, we found two clips with the same background, but wait a minute, they don't tell us where those clips are. So it could just be fake clips
Yeah.
that they're presenting here. So be careful about that. And then a few last points. Okay, then at 2 hours and 17 minutes, the Joe pulls up one web page. Joe asks the question, "What were the modifications that were made to the Hasselblad cameras?" And Jamie finds the document, and that document says that the cameras were adapted by putting a layer of aluminum paint to protect from the heat and the radiation. It's so hilarious. It's so hilarious how anybody could think that a thin layer of aluminum paint would do anything to stop any of the radiation. No, 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 no.
And they'll
It's
say it
just
with a
hilarious.
straight face, as Jamie did. It's a joke.
Yeah. All right. So I think I'm on my last point here is that, well, again, it coming back to the cameras in that document that Joe Rogan reads, he's talking about the cameras had special motors inside to forward the film
Uh-oh, you're breaking up again.
because they're okay.
There we go. You
Do you mind? I got to go to the bathroom really quick.
all right. All right, so Dr. Raza's gotta go for a wee effing wee. He'll be right back after these short messages. Hope you guys are enjoying this. If you guys are in the live chat, hit those like buttons. You are watching this post replay, hit those like buttons. You are listening to this on your favorite audio podcast player. Thank you. Much love. Hit those reviews. It'll help the algorithm. We will. I'll definitely be doing. I mean, Dr. Raz is my homie. If you haven't noticed, so we'll be doing another few shows. I'm sure. One of those shows I definitely want to get into free energy, which is his specialty. Because I don't know shit about free energy, but I'm super stoked to learn about it, especially with a professional such as him. Some people will dismiss free energy research as crackpot, whatever, but they don't know shit. I'm sure if you put him up against Dr. Raza, he would eat him up alive. And so I also think free energy has a lot to do with old world stuff and things along those lines. So I, Dr. Raza, while you were gone, I was just telling people I want to do another show where we just focus and zero in on free energy research. That would be a fire ass show
Yeah,
down the
I
line.
know. I also have a firsthand experience in the suppression of free energy.
I
I
would
know,
love a
like,
show on that, man. I think that would be hot. So that's probably our next topic next time we get together. Free
yeah,
energy research for sure.
that would be good.
Hell
I
yeah.
have a couple. I have a couple videos on my YouTube channel where I do touch that subject because there's another guy named Ben in England who likes that subject. So he asked me. He's very good at it too. He knows the right kind of questions to ask, and he does a lot of his own research.
Maybe I could have
So
both of y'all on my show. I'm just a damn host. I just shoot the shit. But to have both of you guys on and discuss it, I think that would be intriguing because I think I mentioned to you this before where I think a lot of this free energy ties into a lot of this old world stuff and suppression of this technology that's been around for perhaps millennia, and it gets dismissed in the current times as fantastical stuff and whatever. But I don't buy into it, and so to have your expertise, your knowledge on the subject would be pretty damn fire.
yeah, and I've also started preparing this show, a very special show about the Cold War hoax,
Mm.
and I've this is going to be really good because I've been doing a lot of research on this subject, and it's just amazing when you grasp the timeline of these things they were pulling off here. It's
Well, my
incredible.
audience, I that was one of the poll questions. If if people wanted to hear, as one of the next subjects, the Cold War hoax, a lot of people were extremely receptive. So those are, I think, our next subjects. Next time we get together, definitely free energy and Cold War, whichever you prefer to go first. But I definitely want to hit those.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on today. It's been really fun.
Yeah, yeah. I it's always a treat. Little different show, but we definitely focused in on the Bart Sibrel podcast on that second hour. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna divide this up into two parts. Um, make it easier for people to access, but a lot of information. I learned a shit ton. I like you were stressing that we need to get things right and accurate, so we don't look like fools, and these NASA apologists can just, oh yeah, pick us apart. There's a lot of stuff to unpack on this episode, and I learned a lot, quite a bit. So can't thank you enough for that, Dr. Raza. And I'm honored to call you my friend. So it's super cool. And I told you this before, but I was super stoked that even though you didn't get mentioned by name on the Joe Rogan podcast, I
Me
mean,
too, man.
I was bummed by it, but people that know you, I know you, we all knew who exactly Bart Sibrel was talking about when he did mention you every now and then. So um, it's super awesome, to have you as a friend, and hear your insights on this very subject, because this is one of my favorite rabbit holes of all time, is the whole moon landing hoax, and to have you break it down in scientific terms, in ways that make people like Richard Brandt look like complete idiots, is quite the treat. So thanks so much again, Dr. Raza. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, because I know it's Sunday morning over there, Saturday night over here. And we'll definitely be doing some future shows. Where would you want people to find you? I have your links on the bottom of the description, but if there's any other links that you want to direct people, to find your work, where can they do that?
No, it's just the moon landing hoax page, and I don't know if you're interested in my free energy work. That's on this 0 Point Institute YouTube channel.
There you go. All right, y'all. Thank you, Dr. Raza. Always a treat to have you, and hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will definitely be staying in touch.
All right. See you soon.
All right, my man. Take care. All right, y'all. That was Dr. Raza. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Always a treat. I know people in the audio podcast platforms always enjoy hearing Dr. Raza. So definitely hit those reviews. Definitely leave those comments. Someone left me a few comments on Odyssey regarding some of the Zionist stuff. I don't take anything bad, so leave your comments. I might disagree with you, which is what I did with this gentleman, but that's what it's for. It's all about that free speech. Voice your opinion, and that's all I can do. All right, y'all. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Take care, and hugs and kisses.
And now's the time when things are shifting. There's gonna be a new world order out there.
He's dead, so
My fellow Americans, I've said on several occasions that I wouldn't comment about the recent congressional hearings on the Iran-Contra matter